The Devachanic Plain, by Charles Webster Leadbeater. Chapter 1. Symbolism and Allegories of the Devachanic World. In an incipient epistle authored by a distinguished occultist, the ensuing passage was presented as a citation reconstructed from memory. I have remained unable to definitively ascertain its primary origin, although a text that appears to constitute an alternate, significantly amplified iteration is discernible within Beale's Katina of Buddhist scriptures. Our Lord Buddha proclaims that, situated many thousand myriads of world systems beyond our present sphere, there resides a domain of beatitude designated as Sukhavati. This region is encompassed by 7 tiers of railings, 7 tiers of colossal draperies, and 7 rows of undulating trees. This hallowed abode of the Arhats is administered by the Tathagatas and populated by the Bodhisattvas. It encompasses 7 precious lakes, within the center of which circulate crystalline waters endowed with 7 discrete attributes and characteristics, yet coalesced into a unified whole. This O Shariputra constitutes the Devachan. Its celestial Udambara flower extends a root into the umbra of every terrestrial sphere and effloresces for all who achieve access to it. Those who find nativity within this sanctified realm, having traversed the auriferous bridge and attained the 7 golden mountains, are indeed supremely favored. For within that cycle, neither tribulation nor melancholy remains their portion. Although shrouded in the resplendent allegories of the Orient, one may perceive within this excerpt the principal characteristics most lucidly delineated by our contemporary investigators. The 7 golden mountains typify the 7 subdivisions of the mental plane, demarcated from one another by impediments that are impalpable yet genuine and efficacious, precisely as 7 rows of railings, 7 rows of immense curtains, or 7 rows of undulating trees might appear upon the earth. The 7 varieties of crystalline water, each possessing its unique properties and attributes, symbolize the manifold powers and mental states inherent to them, whilst the singular quality universal to all guarantees, for those who reside therein, the supreme intensity of beatitude of which they are susceptible. Its flower does, in truth, embed a root within the shadow of every earth, for from every world man enters his corresponding celestial sphere, and the felicity that no rhetoric can adequately articulate is the blossom that emerges for all who conduct their lives in a manner rendering them worthy of its attainment. They have traversed the golden bridge spanning the current that divides this realm from the world of desire. For them, the conflict between the superior and the inferior has concluded, and for them, there exists no further grief or sorrow in that cycle until man transitions once more into incarnation and the celestial domain is again relinquished for a season. Chapter 2. The Transcendent Essence of Spiritual Ecstasy. This profundity of bliss constitutes the primary tenet which must serve as the foundation for all our conceptualizations of the celestial existence. It is not solely that we are concerned with a domain in which, by its intrinsic nature, malevolence and sorrow are precluded from existence, nor merely a world wherein every entity possesses happiness, but rather a sphere where the reality transcends even these verities. It is a realm in which every soul, by the very virtue of its presence there, partakes of the consummate spiritual ecstasy it is capable of experiencing. A realm whose response to aspiration is circumscribed only by the soul's own capacity to aspire. Here, for the inaugural moment, we commence to discern the veritable essence of the great source of life. Here, for the first time, we apprehend a distant vision of what the Logos truly is and of the destiny he intends for us. And when the magnitude of this reality dawns upon our astonished consciousness, we are compelled to feel that, possessed of such knowledge, life can never again assume its former semblance. We cannot but marvel at the utter insufficiency of mundane conceptions of happiness, and indeed, we cannot fail to perceive that the majority thereof are distorted, inverted, and devoid of potential for fulfillment, and that in his pursuit of happiness, man has, for the most part, averted his gaze from the very objective he covets. Yet here, at last, resides truth and beauty surpassing all that any poet has envisioned, and in the illumination of this transcendent glory, every other joy is revealed as pallid, insubstantial, and unsatisfying. Certain of these aspects we must endeavor to elucidate in detail subsequently, but for the immediate juncture, the essential point is that this radiant perception, not merely of the absence of all iniquity and discord, but of the irresistible and universal presence of felicity, constitutes the initial and most potent impression experienced by one who enters the celestial world. Furthermore, this exalted sensation persists throughout the entirety of his sojourn therein, irrespective of the tasks he may undertake, and regardless of what further summits of spiritual sublimation may unfold before him as he advances into a fuller comprehension of the powers of this novel realm. The ineffable delight of existence in such a sphere forms the substratum of every experience, and the participation in the boundless joy of others is a perpetual companion to him. Nothing terrestrial can sustain a comparison with it. Nothing can adequately represent it. If one were able to conceive of the buoyant vitality of childhood transposed into spiritual existence and subsequently intensified 1,000-fold, even that image would remain but a faint adumbration of that which resides beyond all articulation, the vast spiritual vitality of this celestial realm. One manner in which this overwhelming vitality manifests itself is through the extraordinary rapidity of vibration inherent in all particles and atoms of this mental substance. Theoretically, we are cognizant that even here upon the physical plane, no particle of matter, however dense the form it constitutes, is ever in a state of quiescence. However, when through the awakening of astral vision this becomes not merely a scientific hypothesis but an immediate and ever-present reality, we begin to realize the universality of life in a manner and degree hitherto impossible. The horizon of the intellect expands, and glimpses unfold before us of potentialities within nature that, to those remaining unseeing, must appear as the most extravagant of reveries. If such be the consequence of acquiring astral vision and applying it to the dense matter of the physical plane, contemplate the impact upon the mind of one who, having transcended this physical world and thoroughly analyzed the far more vivid life and swifter vibrations of the astral, discovers yet another and superior sense awakened within him, a faculty that unveils before his enraptured gaze a still loftier world. Therein, the vibrations exceed in rapidity those of our physical plane to the same degree that the vibrations of light surpass those of sound. It is a world where the ceaselessly pulsating life surrounding and permeating him belongs to an order altogether superior, raised, as it were, to an immeasurably greater power. Chapter 3. Cognition and instantaneous communication in heaven. The specific capacity by which the individual apprehends this environment is, in itself, one of the paramount phenomena of the celestial realm. He no longer perceives, hears, or feels via the distinct and circumscribed organs utilized on earth, nor does he have recourse to the significantly augmented vision and audition that were his possession on the astral plane. Rather, he unearths within his being a singular new potency that resembles none of the former, yet encompasses them all and transcends them significantly. Through this agency, he comprehends the instant any entity or object manifests before him, not merely through sight, sound, and sensation, but through an immediate cognition of its intrinsic and extrinsic nature, its antecedents, its consequences, and its potentialities, insofar as that plane and all beneath it are involved. For such a being, to conceive is to actualize. There exists neither doubt, nor vacillation, nor latency in the direct operation of this elevated faculty. Should he contemplate a location, he is present there. Should he contemplate a confidant, that associate materializes before him. Misconstruction cannot occur, nor can superficial semblances beguile him. For every thought and sentiment of his associate lies exposed to his scrutiny as legibly as an inscribed page. If, among his cohorts, there exists one whose elevated faculty is similarly activated, their communion attains a completeness beyond terrestrial imagination. For such individuals, there exists no distance or separation, no obfuscation of sentiment, and no imperfect articulation through inadequate verbiage. Interrogatives and responses are rendered superfluous, for thoughts are deciphered at the moment of their formation, and concepts are exchanged with a celerity equivalent to their genesis within the mind. All erudition lies accessible to their inquiry, provided it does not surpass the boundaries of this exalted plane. The history of the world is as perceptible as the present, for the indelible archives of nature's memory remain perpetually before them. History, whether ancient or contemporary, is unveiled at their volition, no longer subject to the fallacies or biases of chroniclers, for they may personally scrutinize any event that engages their interest with the absolute certainty of witnessing the truth in its totality. Should they possess the capacity to ascend to the superior strata of this plane, the extensive sequence of their prior incarnations unfurls before them like a scroll. They perceive the karmic antecedents that have shaped their current state. They ascertain what karma remains to be resolved before the final ledger is concluded, and thus they identify with infallible precision their exact station in evolution. Should the question be posed as to whether they can envision the future with the same clarity as the past, the response must be in the negative, for that capacity pertains to a yet loftier plane. Although prescience is attainable to a substantial degree in this realm, it is never absolute, for wherever the will of a developed individual penetrates the tapestry of destiny, he may introduce new filaments and modify the pattern of existence to come. The trajectory of the ordinary, undeveloped individual, whose will is too impotent to bear significant weight, may frequently be prognosticated with lucidity. However, when the ego assumes firm command of his own future, precise precognition is rendered impossible. Chapter 4. Chromatic and auditory expressions of the mind. The initial impressions of the pupil who accesses the mental plane with complete consciousness shall most likely comprise a sense of overwhelming bliss, ineffable vitality, vastly augmented power, and the absolute confidence that emanates from such conditions. Upon utilizing his newly acquired faculties to survey his environment, he discovers himself submerged within what appears to be a veritable universe of perpetually shifting light, color, and sound, transcending anything his most exalted imagination had previously devised. Verily, it is asserted that eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither hath it entered into the heart of man to conceive the splendors of the heaven world. Furthermore, he who has once consciously experienced these wonders shall regard the terrestrial sphere forevermore with transformed vision. Nevertheless, this experience differs so radically from anything known upon the physical plane that, in endeavoring to depict it, one encounters a profound sense of helplessness, not merely an incapacity to render it justice, an ambition which must be relinquished at the outset, but indeed an inability to convey even the slightest impression thereof to those who have not personally beheld it. Let an individual envision himself, possessed of the sensations of bliss and augmented power previously enumerated, suspended within an ocean of living light, encompassed by every manifestation of loveliness in color and form. Let him further conceive that these phenomena alter with each fluctuation of his ideation, constituting, as he subsequently ascertains, nothing other than the expression of his own thought within the matter of the plane and its elemental essence. For this substance is of the identical order as that which composes the mind-body itself. Consequently, when that vibration of particles which we designate as a thought transpires, it immediately propagates itself to the ambient mental matter, establishing corresponding vibrations therein, whilst mirroring itself with absolute fidelity within the elemental essence. Concrete thoughts naturally assume the semblance of their objects, whereas abstract ideas manifest through the most exquisite and flawless geometrical forms, although it must be borne in mind that numerous conceptions which remain mere abstractions to us become concrete realities upon this loftier plane. It follows that, within this elevated realm, any individual desiring to dedicate himself temporarily to tranquil meditation may indeed inhabit a world of his own creation, beyond all possibility of perturbation, possessing the additional advantage of perceiving his thoughts drift before him as a continuous panorama. If, however, he wishes instead to scrutinize the conditions of the plane wherein he is situated, it is requisite that he suspend his own ideation for the moment, lest its fabrications impact the sensitive matter surrounding him and thereby modify the circumstances insofar as he is concerned. This cessation of thought must not be conflated with the mental vacuity sought in numerous practices of Hatha Yoga, wherein the mind is subjugated into passivity to admit external influences, a state bordering upon mediumship. Here, the mind remains keenly active and alert, restraining its activity only sufficiently to preclude the intrusion of personal bias into the observation being conducted. When the visitor succeeds in this endeavor, he discovers that although he no longer radiates from himself the splendor of light, color, form, and sound so vainly described, these phenomena have not ceased to exist. On the contrary, their harmonies and coruscations appear grander and more replete than heretofore. In seeking an elucidation of this phenomenon, he realizes that this magnificence constitutes no arbitrary or meaningless display, nor a mere Devachanic aurora, but rather possesses a significance intelligible to him. He presently discerns that what he contemplates with such ecstasy is the resplendent color language of the Devas, the expression of their thought and communication, beings immeasurably superior to him in the scale of evolution. Through experimentation, he ascertains that he, too, may employ this novel and exquisite mode of expression. Through this discovery, he enters into yet another portion of his inheritance within the celestial realm, the capacity to converse with and learn from its loftier, non-human inhabitants, of whom more shall be discoursed subsequently. It will by this juncture be evident why no distinct section could be allocated to the scenery of the mental plane, as was performed regarding the astral. For in truth, the mental world possesses no scenery save that which each individual himself engenders via his thought, unless one considers the countless beings who pass before him, who are themselves, in manifold instances, objects of transcendent beauty. Yet, it would be more precise to state that all potential scenery exists therein, that nothing conceivable of beauty in earth, sea, or sky is absent, but that each man perceives only so much as his own nature enables him to perceive, that to which his development during earth life and astral life renders him capable of responding. Chapter 5. Rhythmic Vibrations and the Cosmic Anthem. Should the observer wish to further his investigation of the plane and ascertain its nature when entirely uninfluenced by the cognition or discourse of its denizens, He may achieve this by ensconcing himself within an immense enclosure through which none of these extrinsic impressions may penetrate, subsequently scrutinizing the internal conditions. Provided this experiment is executed with meticulous solicitude, he discovers that the luminous ocean is not rendered quiescent, for its constituent particles persist in their vehement and rapid oscillation. Rather, it has become homogeneous, with the resplendent coruscations of color and interminable metamorphoses of form no longer manifesting. Instead, he discerns an entirely distinct sequence of rhythmic pulsations, which the more superficial phenomena had hitherto obscured. These pulsations are manifestly universal, and no barrier constructed by mortal agency possesses the capacity to impede or divert them. They engender no color and adopt no visible configuration, yet they flow with immutable constancy through the entire fabric of the plane, oscillating outward and inward like the respiration of some immense and concealed life. Multiple categories of these pulsations may be differentiated, divergent from one another in amplitude, in oscillatory frequency, and in the tonality of the harmony they transmit. Transcending them all undulates one colossal wave, the very heartbeat of the system, emanating from inscrutable loci upon far more elevated planes, infusing its vitality through our world, and subsequently receding in a majestic tide toward the source from which it originated. It approaches in one immense, undulating arc, its acoustic quality akin to the murmur of the ocean, and permeating it all reverberates a potent anthem of triumph, the very music of the spheres. The individual who has once perceived that sublime anthem of nature never entirely forfeits the memory. Even here, within this dismal corporeal realm of illusion, he detects it still as a resonant undertone, perpetually maintaining before his consciousness the fortitude, the magnificence, and the luminescence of the veritable existence beyond. Should the visitor possess immaculacy of heart and intellect, having attained a requisite degree of spiritual evolution, it is feasible for him to coalesce his consciousness with the motion of that majestic wave, to amalgamate himself within it, and to be transported upward toward its origin. While such a feat is indeed achievable, it is not prudent unless his master stands alongside him to recall him at the precise juncture from its potent embrace. Otherwise, its inexorable force shall sweep him away into superior planes, the transcendent glories of which his ego is not yet sufficiently fortified to withstand. He would forfeit sentience, possessing no assurance regarding the time, location, or manner of its restoration. It is undeniably true that the ultimate objective of human evolution is the realization of unity. Nevertheless, that consummation must be achieved in a state of absolute and perfect awareness, akin to a victorious monarch entering triumphantly into his inheritance, and not by drifting into assimilation within a state of vacuous insentience scarcely removed from total annihilation. Chapter 6. Dual divisions of the mental realm and the causal body. All that has been delineated heretofore relates exclusively to the lowest subdivision of the mental plane. For this sphere of existence, analogous to the astral and physical realms, is segmented into 7 distinct partitions. The 4 inferior strata are designated the planes of form, and these constitute the lower heaven world, wherein the average individual experiences a prolonged interval of felicity betwixt successive incarnations. The remaining 3 are styled formless, and they comprise the higher heaven world, the habitation of the reincarnating ego and the veritable domicile of the human soul. Such nomenclature is employed because, upon the planes of form, every thought adopts a definitive configuration, whereas upon the formless planes, intellect ion manifests in a wholly distinct modality. The disparity between these 2 divisions, the planes of form and those of formlessness, is salient and necessitates distinct vehicles of consciousness. The appropriate instrument for the lower heaven world is the mental body, whilst that for the higher heaven world is the causal body, the vessel of the reincarnating ego, through which he transits from life to life across the entire trajectory of evolution. A further significant divergence resides in the fact that, upon the four lower planes, a degree of illusion remains possible. This applies not to the entity stationed therein with full consciousness during life, but rather to the unevolved soul who enters subsequent to the transition designated as death. The elevated thoughts and aspirations which he engendered during earthly existence accumulate about him, coalescing into a protective enclosure, a subjective cosmos of his own making. Within this sphere he experiences his celestial existence, discerning but dimly, if at all, the veritable magnificences of the planes surrounding him, and frequently presuming that which he surveys to be the totality of existence. Nevertheless, it would be erroneous to deem this thought veil a constraint. Its function is to facilitate his responsiveness to specific vibrations rather than to preclude him from others. In actuality, these encompassing cognitions constitute the very agencies by which he draws upon the inexhaustible reservoirs of the heaven world. This mental plane itself mirrors the divine mind, an infinite repository from which each soul partaking of celestial beatitude derives sustenance commensurate with the vigor of the thoughts and aspirations nurtured during its physical and astral existence. Within the superior heaven world, such circumscription ceases. It is undeniable that, even therein, many egos remain but dimly and somnolently conscious of their milieu. Yet, to the extent that they perceive, they discern with veracity, for thought no longer assumes the constrained configurations it sustained in the lower regions. Chapter 7. Observing the radiant dynamics of mental energy. While the precise psychological condition of the human residents dwelling within these variegated subplanes shall be accorded a more exhaustive treatment in its proper sequential section, a comprehension of the modus operandi of thought upon the lower and higher levels respectively is so indispensable to an accurate understanding of these primary divisions that it is deemed of significant value to chronicle certain experiments performed by our investigators for the purpose of elucidating this subject. At the inception of the inquiry, it became manifest that, analogous to the astral plane, the mental plane possessed an elemental essence distinct from the constituent matter of the plane itself, and furthermore, that this essence was characterized by a susceptibility to thought even more immediate than that observed in the lower realms. Within the heaven world, wherein all comprises thought substance, both the elemental essence and the plane's matter were subject to the direct influence of mental activity, thereby mandating a concerted effort to differentiate between these dual effects. Following several indeterminate trials, a methodology was adopted which afforded a reasonably lucid comprehension of the divergent results. This entailed one investigator remaining upon the lowest subdivision to project the thought forms, whilst his colleagues ascended to a superior level to observe from an elevated vantage, thus mitigating the hazard of confusion. Under these controlled conditions, the experiment of transmitting a thought of affection and benevolence to a remote friend was executed, yielding results of a remarkable nature. A species of vibrating shell materialized within the matter of the plane, radiating outward from the operator in all directions. This phenomenon bore resemblance to the concentric undulations generated in quiescent water when a stone is cast therein, with the distinction that this manifestation constituted a multidimensional sphere of vibration rather than a mere planar surface. These vibrations, akin to those upon the physical plane albeit diminishing with greater graduality, attenuated in intensity as they propagated from the source, until, at vast distances, they appeared to evanesce or become. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.